A spark in the Middle East. It's a story we've all heard before, right? But this time, it feels different. The fire is threatening to spread way beyond its borders. So the big question is, how does something that starts as a regional conflict suddenly become a global crisis? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down.
Okay, let's just try to wrap our heads around the scale of this because it's huge. The Pentagon is reporting over 15,000 targets have been hit inside Iran. And this is a joint U.S. and Israeli military operation. I mean, we're not talking about a small skirmish here. This is an all-out assault.
And how did Iran respond? Well, with pure defiance. This quote you see here from their state media, look, this isn't just empty talk. It's a straight-up promise of retaliation. And that, right there, is what sets the stage for a really dangerous cycle of back-and-forth escalation.
All right, so let's zoom in on the absolute epicenter of this crisis. We're talking about the direct conflict that's erupting inside Iran itself.
So you've got state television reporting these massive explosions rocking Tehran, the capital. And at the very same time, a whole new wave of missiles is being launched at Israel. This is so important to understand. The war isn't just happening on some distant military base, it's literally erupting in the heart of major cities.
And it's not just a shooting war, right? There's this war of words happening in parallel. On one side, you have President Trump promising to hit Iran very hard. Then, on the other, you've got Supreme Leader Khamenei making this absolute immovable declaration about a critical waterway. The takeaway here? Neither side is showing any sign of backing down.
You know, a conflict this intense, it never stays contained, does it? So let's talk about the shockwave. Let's look at how this war almost immediately started spilling over its borders. And this is where we see the immediate, tragic human cost. We're getting reports of 4 U.S. service members killed in a plane crash over in Iraq, and at the same time, 8 people were killed in an Israeli strike on a village in southern Lebanon. You can just see how the violence is radiating outwards, pulling more and more people into its orbit.
But the impact on civilians, that's where things get really staggering. An NGO is reporting that Israeli evacuation orders now affect 14% of Lebanon's entire population. Let that sink in. That's about 1 in every 7 people being forced to leave their homes. We are watching a massive humanitarian crisis unfold in real time.
And right in the middle of all this chaos, you have the UN chief visiting Beirut. He's on what they're calling a solidarity mission, and his plea is just simple and desperate. Stop the war. It's one of those moments that just perfectly highlights this growing sense of international powerlessness, you know? Like, what can anyone even do in the face of this kind of escalating violence?
So, when the human cost is mounting like this, and diplomacy seems to be failing, the shockwaves, they start to be felt everywhere. So now, let's pull the camera back a bit. Let's widen the lens and see exactly how this regional war becomes a direct threat to the global economy.
Okay, so much of this conflict really hinges on one single location, the Strait of Hormuz, and is so much more than just a body of water. It's what experts call a fundamental choke point for global oil trade. Think about it. About one-fifth of all the oil the world uses passes through this tiny, narrow lane every single day. And this is where the economic battle lines are drawn clear as day. The U.S. comes out and says unequivocally shipping through the strait will not be contested, period. But at the very same time, Iran's supreme leader vows it will remain closed. This isn't a maybe. It's a direct economic showdown, and the whole world is going to feel the effects.
So what's the immediate fallout? Well, you can see it right here. Oil prices just surge. Brent crude, that's the big international benchmark for oil prices, it shoots past $100 a barrel. It's on track for a 9% jump in a single week. And if you're wondering why this matters, well, for basically everyone who drives a car or heats their home, this has a very real direct impact on your wallet.
Okay, with the stakes getting this high, the rest of the world can't just sit back and watch, right? This crisis is basically forcing other nations off the sidelines. They have to react, and in some cases, they're having to choose a side.
And this just gives you a little snapshot of the incredibly complex diplomatic dance that's going on. I mean, look at this. You have Turkey, which is a NATO member, shooting down an Iranian missile. Then you've got China providing humanitarian aid to Iran. Meanwhile, Pakistan is pledging its support to Saudi Arabia for regional peace. And somehow, in the middle of all that, the IAEA is still trying to broker a new nuclear deal. It is an absolutely messy, multi-layered global response. Now, some countries are already trying to get ahead of the economic fallout. Take Pakistan's power minister, for example. He's out there publicly highlighting his country's resilience to any energy disruptions. He's essentially trying to calm fears by pointing to how much power they generate at home.
And this is the why behind his confidence. Here's the data. Almost 3/4 of Pakistan's electricity comes from its own local sources. That liquefied natural gas, the stuff that's really vulnerable to shipping disruptions, that's only about 10% of their mix. So in a world that's suddenly facing all this energy uncertainty, having that kind of domestic reliance, well, that's a really powerful strategy to protect your economy.
So all of this, everything we've talked about, it brings us to the single most important question, right? With the entire region on a knife's edge, what on earth happens next? And believe me, it's not just us asking this. The entire international community is trying to figure this out. With tensions at an absolute breaking point, is there any path away from this spiraling into an even wider, more devastating war?
And just when the world is desperately searching for some kind of off-ramp, some way to de-escalate, a brand new voice emerges from Iran, and he comes out with this incredibly radical demand. Mojtaba Khamenei. He declares that the United States must close all its bases in the region. I mean, listen to that language. That's not a negotiation tactic. That's an ultimatum, and it really hints at a serious hardline shift inside Iran.
Which, of course, raises one last crucial question. This guy, he's not the supreme leader, but he has the same last name. So, as the entire world kind of holds its breath, you have to wonder, who is Mojtaba Khamenei?